Hey everybody, we are going to go look at some more ancient United States. I am going to be talking about a few different subjects along the way here in the next week or two, but a lot of my videos will be concentrating on the same subject. But we're going down to Moundsville, West Virginia, and this is a site of a very prominent ancient mound, and here it is right here. If we back up a little, this is right by the Ohio River, and it's right by an elbow of the river, and a lot of these ancient sites seem to be put right by a so-called elbow of the river. I just wanted to mention that, and a few articles have mentioned that. The significance of that, I have no clue. We're going to go down here, and I'm going to read a little bit about this mound and talk a little bit about its history, how it was treated. We're going to view just a portion of a video clip, and I'm going to leave a bunch of clips below. Here is the mound today, right in the middle of a neighborhood, and this is one of the largest, along with the Miamisburg Mound. This is pretty much as big as the mounds get as far as conical pyramids, as they are called. And there is a little bit of history here about this mound. I just want to read a little bit and show you some pics, and then I'm going to get on to my next video. But this was an important site to share. Now here you see the view of the mound, and then the view of the river. This is up a little bit on an elevated perch, and in ancient times this would have been viewed from these valleys and from probably a great distance. I just wanted to show you that. Get an idea of the size here, and you can walk up to the top of this mound today. And the preservation has been pretty good, and there is a little museum and historical center here. But let's just move on to some websites and do a little reading. I'll show you some old pics. Now here's a look at the Grave Creek Mound today. Some pretty large trees growing in it here. Now here's a website. I will leave the link below. I think this comes from the museum located on the site. It says, the heart of the site is probably the most famous and certainly the largest of the Adena burial mounds. A massive undertaking, the total effort required the movement of more than 60,000 tons of earth. Artifacts and exhibits interpreting the lifestyle of the Adena people are displayed at the Delft-Nerona Museum, adjacent to the 2,000-year-old mound. It says the first recorded excavation of the mound took place in 1838. Conducted by local amateurs. To gain entrance to the mound, 2 horizontal tunnels and 1 vertical shaft were created, and that sounds like what was done at the Miamisburg Mound. This led to the most significant discovery of 2 burial vaults. In addition to the Adena ornaments and remains found in the interior, the upper vault contained a small, flat sandstone tablet. Later, authenticity of the tablet and the meaning of its inscription became quite controversial. Though the stone has never been authenticated, it has been disputed by most professionals. A replica of the original is on display in the museum. Now they have a video attached here, and let's just play a part of this here.
Hello, and welcome to the Grave Creek Mound Archaeological Complex in Moundsville. We are a unique facility for West Virginia and the region. We are a museum, a historic site, and research center, all in one. The Grave Creek Mound is recognized as one of the largest conical burial mounds from the Adena tradition, a period in Native American history dating from around 500 BC to AD 100. Originally, the mound stood nearly 70 feet tall. Based on archaeological research, we know the mound was constructed in 2 successive stages from about 250 to 100 BC. We also know the mound was surrounded by a 40-foot wide moat, some 5 feet deep, with a causeway for access. Our knowledge and understanding of the mound is very limited because the people exploring the mound in 1838 were seeking treasures. They were not archaeologists. 2 horizontal tunnels and a large vertical tunnel were excavated into the mound, where at least 2 Adena burial vaults were found. Those tunnels are no longer open to the public. Today, visitors can walk to the top of the mound on a stone staircase. The Delft-Nerona Museum presents a fine collection of Native American and historic artifacts representing West Virginia's rich archaeological heritage. Exhibits help explain how the mound was constructed and explored. also offer insight into Native American lifeways and the interpretation of 2 other excavated archaeological sites in the area.
Now here is the earliest pic of Grave Creek Mound in Moundsville, West Virginia, and this comes from 1857. That's a very early photo. What I noticed here is this step going up to the top of the mound was already here. And what is this 3-story structure right here? That is a saloon. You could go up and have a cocktail at the top of the mound in the mid-1800s, and it seems the people that were here and owned this land originally, and the terrain looks a little different here, back about 170 years ago, but there was an initial house built right by the mound. I'm assuming it's this one, and it's the owner of this house that did some amateur archaeology on this mound, but there was a couple tombs found in here at different levels, and they just theorized that different people buried different people here at different times. Now, I wanted to learn more about that Grave Creek stone, that tablet that was found in the top of the pyramid, because that really fascinates me. What do you base the authenticity on? Well, it's kind of a complicated story. It no longer is around today. Were the original depictions of it accurate? Was it actually found here? Where did it go? What became of it? Should you base it on other stones? Well, other stones have been proven to be very, very authentic. Other stones have been proven to be a total hoax. So you can't really base any of your research on what was found, because each of these stones, you got to take it as an individual case, and you could probably make a whole half-hour video on just this stone, but I'm going to just make this as brief as I can. But I decided to share this website. This was written by Rebecca Taylor. Goes into the history of the mound, and here's that earliest photo. But it says, the story of the Grave Creek stone remains a favorite of mine and my college students. The mound underwent its first excavation by a group of local men in 1838, led by Abelard and Jesse Tomlinson, the descendants of Joseph Tomlinson. The workers unearthed many different artifacts, including handmade jewelry, skeletal remains, and allegedly a small stone tablet. The Grave Creek stone, as it has been come to known, was said to have been found in one of the mound's burial vaults. On one side contained an inscription in a still unverified language. The stone first came back to the broader public's attention when an article about it was published in the Cincinnati Enquirer in 1839. No one could have imagined then that a sandstone disc measuring just 1 7/8 inches by 1½ inches would lead to more than 150 years of international speculation and intrigue that begins before the stone was even hauled out of the mound. Different accounts of its discovery have led many to denounce the stone as a forgery. As recently as 2008, David Oestreicher argued that a Wheeling doctor named James W. Clemens may have inscribed the stone in his garage, where he was known to have machinery necessary to do so. Others argue that it is authentic, but among those scholars who do believe that the message was created by an ancient civilization, there is no consensus on what the stone says, who wrote it, or when. The speculations have been diverse, as a Viking Christmas message to a note from aliens. Giorgio, have you been commenting on this stone? But here is a photocopy of the drawing on the Grave Creek stone. It says, the real mystery, at least for me growing up, is the current location of the stone. As a child, I was told that the Smithsonian borrowed the stone to study it, but never gave it back. Everyone who heard that rumor wondered, why would they take it? Does the message change history? Do they just not care about West Virginia? According to a 1909 letter sent to J.D. Shaw, editor of the Moundsville Echo, from Hills to Haas, the tablet was deposited temporarily in the Smithsonian Institute, where casts were made of wax, plaster, etc., and generally distributed. Sherry de Haas states, the tablet forms part of my large and valuable collection. The stone's last known whereabouts was in the collection of E. H. Davis, an American archaeologist and physician who worked with E. G. Squire to research and write Ancient Monuments of the Mississippi Valley. By the time he died in 1888, Davis had amassed the largest collection of burial mound relics in the United States. His collection was later given to the Blackmore Museum in Salisbury, UK, who then sold it to the British Museum. According to a 1989 inquiry by Ohio State University professor Houston McCullough, the British Museum's North American ethnographic collection is not in possession of the stone. The riddle of the stone's inscription is even more captivating. Archaeologists, linguists, and other high-profile professionals have offered a wide variety of interpretations as to the date of the inscription and its meaning. Given that no one currently living has seen the stone in person, most scholars have been working with a flawed copy of the inscription. McCullough confirms this by noting that some of the casts are not accurate impressions. Therefore, it is no surprise that several interpretations were inaccurate. McCullough, who has personally viewed the Smithsonian cast and a wax impression in the National Anthropological Archives, argues that the drawing by Seth Eastman, which appears in Henry R. Schoolcraft's 1850 Indian Tribes in the United States, is the only reliable drawing of this stone beyond his own. So apparently the Smithsonian had these in their possession. They made casts of them, and they were inaccurate. It says, in fact, the limited ideologies of some of the academics who have studied the stone have radically impacted the way it is understood to the present day. Charles Whittlesey, a prominent soldier, attorney, and scholar, condemned the stone to its modern-day position as a forgery, first in Archaeological Frauds in 1876, and then in 1879 in the Grave Creek inscribed stone. In a later piece, he argues that since the markings on the stones are not alphabetical and are not recognizable as any known symbolic language, it is therefore of small consequence whether the stone is antique or modern, whether it is genuine or a fraud. So just because this language on this stone was indecipherable by this pinhead, he says it's a fraud. Just because it's an unknown language, that is one of the poorest demonstrations of archaeological research I have ever read. It goes on to say, Whittlesey's words proved to be the death knell for the stone, and scholars who believed the stone to be authentic were chastised by their colleagues. Indeed, it is widely agreed that Willis DeHaas was demoted from his job as head of the Smithsonian Bureau of Ethnology's Mound Survey Project because of his well-known support of the authenticity of the stone. But the range of speculation on this stone has been wide and varied. Is it authentic? Should we just dismiss it because we can't recognize the language? Well, I'm going to leave it up to my viewers here. Do they know anything about this stone? Does it look familiar from other stones we have from the ancient United States? Inscribed stones, I'm going to be going over more into that in the future in some videos. But I find this fascinating, that there seemed to be a language that was put in a very important part in this burial compartment in this mound in Moundsville, West Virginia. But my thoughts on the authenticity, well, I think it's very possible, and it seems to have been discredited, like a lot of ancient stones were, where people were just not willing to accept the deeper history in this country, and pretty closed-minded research, if you ask me. But here is a website. This is called Graves of the Dead, and I will leave this website below. But here is that earliest pic of the Grave Creek Mound. Here is a pic of settlers around it, coming from over 100 years ago, I believe. 79 feet high, 900 feet in circumference. But this website goes over the history of this in the 1800s. It says, the mound quickly became a popular tourist attraction, boosted in part by its frequent mentions in the river atlases of the day that detailed the sites along the trip from Pittsburgh south. There was widespread speculation of what was inside. Smaller mounds had already been excavated. Most contained a few skeletons and some trinkets. Because of its size, Grave Creek was imagined to hold something of greater magnitude, perhaps thousands of skeletons. or maybe some untold treasures. It says the Tomlinsons wanted nothing of it. As the mound's ownership passed between generations, they held firm to keeping the pickaxes off of it and out of their hill, but their resistance could only last so long. Much of the struggle is laid out in Moundsville's Mammoth Mound, written in 1962 by Delph Nerona, a founding member of the West Virginia Historical Society. In 1938, as an anonymous article appeared in a local newspaper taking the citizens of Moundsville to task for not getting on with the digging. Men, illustrious for their scientific and philosophical researches, it said, have given it as their belief that it is a repository of some mighty race who preceded the supposed aborigines of this country, and that it is a subculture in which sleep some of the mighty rulers of the earth. Scientists of the era attributed them to wandering Chinese, Egyptians, Vikings, and Phoenicians. One theory credited the mounds to a lost tribe of Israel, essentially solving two mysteries with one hill. But what the Tomlinsons did is they sank a shaft into the center here, a vertical shaft, and then one about 4 feet off the ground horizontally. And they did find some skeletons. They weren't professional archaeologists, and none of the documentation seems to be made of the skeletons. If you have any information on that I couldn't find in my limited time for my research, please leave it in the comments section. But they found the usual copper beads, copper artifacts. They found mica and other trinkets, and I will leave this link below. And after their excavation, they turned this place into a kind of a mini museum where they charged people that were excursioning down the river a small fee to look inside of the mound. And here is another early pic of the mound. Seems it always had old tree growth in it. Seems there was different materials in here, just like a lot of these mounds, but this one was very large and obviously very important and seemed to be similar to the Miamisburg Mound. Now, how did the mound get its name? Well, we can go to the famous Meriwether Lewis, of famed Lewis and Clark. He visited this mound on September 10th, 1803, and this is what he says about it. This remarkable mound of earth stands on the east bank of the Ohio, 12 miles below Wheeling, and about 700 paces from the river. As the land is not cleared, the mound is not visible from the river. So, obviously, when this mound was built, trees were cleared. This was in a clearing, and it had a henge or a moat around it that was pretty large. So this obviously was cleared at some time in the distant past. It says, this mound gets its name from two small creeks called the Little and Big Grave Creek, which pass about a half a mile on each side of it and fall into the Ohio about a mile distance from each other. The small creek is above the mound, stands on the most elevated ground of a large bottom containing about 4,000 acres of land. And that comes from Meriwether Lewis, September 10th, 1803. But that is a look at some of the history of the mound in Moundsville, West Virginia, called the Grave Creek Mound. If anybody from this area has any information on the mound or that small tablet that was found in one of the burial tombs, one of the chambers, please leave that info below. And I hope you thought this was interesting, and you all have a very nice day.